Welcome to another live stream. This is number 5 that I've been doing. This month, I'm trying to do one every Monday. So, by that math, I got one left starting next week. I actually got a job. So, I won't be doing renovations full time. I'm a maintenance manager, but I'm going to keep doing this because this is super fun for me. And I love getting feedback from people. I didn't get a lot of emails this week. So, I'm hoping if people are in the chat, they're going to give me questions to answer. But I have a few things lined up. I mentioned in the community post what I was going to talk about today. So, we're going to start off with bad client warning signs. And the reason I'm bringing this up is mainly because you're going to be talking to a contractor at some point, and you want to make sure that conversation is fruitful and that you're doing the right things even though you're protecting your own interest. There is a way to talk to people to get the most from it. So I have a little list here that I put together, and got to turn it over because it's all. Hi Randy, good to see you. Thanks so much for all your comments and everything. I really appreciate you being involved, and I'm going to do this just for you today, sounds like. So the warning signs that I have for bad clients, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to phrase all this, but in without triggering people, because everyone is really trying to make sure that they don't get screwed. Contractors have terrible relationships, but I'm around contractors of a certain quality of business, right? Not only are they good at the work, but they run a good business and they are trying to do right by people. So I've got 7 little red flags, we'll call them here. So if any of these upset you, I'm sorry, but these are over my experience over the last 15 years of running a renovation business, things that people ask me or say to me in our conversation that perk my ears up, that make me realize, this may not be somebody I want to work with. So the first one is sort of when somebody asks if they can work on the project with me, in the sense like, hey, you're going to be hanging doors. Can I help? Can I be your hands? Can I learn? All these things get involved. And I get it. You want to save money. You want to learn how to do it because it's cool. You're interested. However, it does slow people down. Hi, Raj. You making some progress. Thanks to your videos. Happy to do it, Raj. Keep them coming. Please send me questions, pictures, whenever you like. So when somebody asks me if they can work on a project now, when I was younger and starting out, I was like, yeah, sure, you can help. The tough part is it doesn't help, it slows you down. These are people who do not have a lot of experience in this and they want to gain experience and they want to understand or they want to save a little bit of money. And more often than not, it ends badly. I'll tell you a quick story. Gabe, who is a contractor that used to be an employee of mine, had a client who wanted to help out just doing some menial little tasks. So they were going to be spraying the walls for painting, right? Using a paint sprayer. And they were covering the windows in all the bedrooms and offices and so forth. So there were 7 windows to cover. This is a gentleman who is retired. So in the time that the 7 windows got covered, Gabe did 6 and the client did 1, and the 1 had to be redone because the client didn't do it properly after Gabe showed him. Now, I am not dumping on the client. They are doing their best, but they don't have the experience and the repetition and all these things to do these things, right? They don't have the tools, they don't have the reps, they don't have the vocabulary and all these things. So what happens is it ends up slowing people down, right? It impacts your project. And if you're paying somebody a time and material and you're going to be helping them, be prepared for that to cost more and not less. Where I make exceptions, and I've done it on my last couple of projects, is when somebody goes, hey, do you mind if we use my electrician? And I'm like, yeah, no problem. As long as it fits into the schedule and doesn't hold me back and I don't have to manage them. Because if now you say, okay, here's my electrician's number. Well, now you're getting me to do my job for free. Now I got to call them. Now I got to meet with them. Now I have to schedule them. Now I have to go on site and make sure everything is the way it should be. That's what you pay a general contractor for. So as long as it doesn't slow me down and I'm not managing them, which is what I do as a general contractor, or what I did, shall we say, no problem. Or do you want to paint? You want to paint? Awesome. Here's the window you have to paint. Great. Go ahead and get it done. Super. Or we used to offer like a basement rough in package where we would take your basement all the way to drywall, like all the framing, rough-ins, insulation, board, tape. And once it's taped and sanded, it's all yours to paint, do the floors and whatever. That wasn't super popular. I thought it would be, and I was wrong. People didn't really jump on that one. A few people did, but more often than not, what happened was they got stalled and they're like, yeah, can you just do the whole thing? So we would end up doing the whole thing. So it was a nice little package, but not the greatest thing in the world. Point number two is, what if I supply the materials? Now, as a contractor, I am trying to warranty as much as I can. But if you supply the materials and I supply the labor, and there's a discrepancy there in the application of it. So, say you buy a cheap product and I don't approve it. Now you're like, well, you got to put this in. Well, more often than not, and this comes with flooring or other things, they're cheap products, they're crappy products, and they are more work to install and make look nice than buying a better product. You're not skimping on drywall. There's just you're going to Home Depot. The same deep drywall you're getting from Home Depot is the drywall I'm buying from my supplier. So let's use flooring as an example, right? We just talked about warranty. You're going to supply, I'm going to install, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, um, this floor is not coming together right. And I'm like, well, the product itself is not very good. We in the past have had issues when clients will supply, say, tiles from a big box store. And the thing with tiles is like they're machined, but they're not all perfectly symmetrical and they're not all the same size. So when you get the cheaper tiles, and by cheaper, I mean less specialized, the variation between each tile tends to be a little bit more. So now your grout lines aren't the same, your layout, if it's like a little bit out of square, you're either putting that one aside. How are you going to calculate materials? That's something I do. So there's a big chunk of that is it's not really feasible. My painters say like, "Oh, I want to supply the paint." Well, we use the higher end paint because it covers better and it produces a better finish. Well, if you're going to go buy the budget paint or whatever's on sale and then it goes on and you don't like it, well, there's a reason we use the better paints. So when somebody asks to supply materials, those are moments where I'm willing to educate, like especially like say the somebody's willing to help, right? And let's go back for a second. One of the challenges with somebody helping is insurance. Do you have work here? It's called WSIB. So if you're working on a construction site, you need steel toe boots and you need to make sure your insurance is covering it. Because if you get hurt or you damage something, then now we have a problem. You put a nail through a wire or a pipe and you get hurt or something leaks. Well, that's on you, not me. But now we have a discrepancy. My job is to protect both of us. So that was one of the things. When it comes to materials, my job is to educate you, inform you like this is why we use this product. And over time that evolves. There was a flooring, and I talked about it in another video, where we used a certain type of flooring and that we thought at that time was the best. And then now we realize, okay, it is not the best. So now we've moved to a different product. So we are trying to make it as easy for the client as possible. And with these moments, they are trying to save money. Like when a client tells me, what if I pay cash? This does happen. There are instances where people do pay cash and they're okay with it, right? I I can't do my invoicing and all that stuff. I can't get my HST back if I take cash. So for me, it's on the books. There are things that you can pay cash for, but if somebody right away says to me in a conversation, what if I pay cash? A basement is a 40, 50, 60, 70,000 project. You're buying a Lexus, you're buying a big car, and if you're telling me you're going to pay cash for all this, well, how much of that are you going to give me up front? Because I'm not going out. I gotta pay for materials and everything, right? And then I gotta pay everybody along the way. Why are you trying to make this more complicated? It does get more complicated for me. And the truth is, in talking to my accountant, like maybe I'm making another 10 to 15%. But then I gotta hide all that money. I gotta figure out a way to do my payroll. I gotta figure out how to hide all these invoices from my subs. Cash is not king in a lot of conversations. The other thing about cash is there's no contract, there's no warranty. The idea behind cash is that I don't exist so that the government doesn't tax me. right? And that would be the benefit to me, but it's not really that great because it's so hard. If you're going to hand me 70 grand, which you're not, right? I would not, if somebody said to me, look, we're going to do this thing with no contract and you're asking me for $5,000 cash before you start. Well, that's a hard no. How am I protected from you just taking my 5 grand and walking? And for me as a contractor, I have been screwed by people before. So I'm not going to buy all these materials with no contract without a deposit. So the paperwork protects both of us. So when people ask for cash, again, this is an education point, and I really try to bring that home. But it is a red flag to me when somebody in our very first conversation with no established trust says, let's do this for cash. That's a big red flag. When I do supply quotes and somebody asks me to separate the cash, the materials and the labor for each subtask, my answer is always the same. It's no. Why do you need the materials and the labor? It's so you can say you can analyze it and understand it. No, it's usually because you can contest it. Most of my subcontractors do not charge by the hour. And in the reality is you're paying these people for speed. If you are paying $10,000 to have your basement floor put in, right? You want them to be done in a day. You don't want them to be done in 4 days. So you're paying for speed. A lot of it is, in some cases, depending on the trade, it's a unit price. You're paying, 275 a square foot to put in the floor. You're paying $5 a square foot to supply and install drywall, which is expensive. Take note, that's expensive. That's a lot of money for drywall. How am I going to break that down? Drywall is almost 80%, if not more, labor. So now you're going to come back and say, no, that's too much. What do I do with my guy? Oh, it's too much. He just walks. And now I got to find somebody else. So when people ask me to separate materials and labor, it's a no. I understand the market. I'd been doing it for years. Our price was in line with other contractors of the same caliber that produce the same quality of work. I was not worried. But when you're telling me you want to separate labors and materials, that's so you can be constantly picking it. Oh, well, that only took 5 hours. How many hours did you budget? Well, I budgeted 8 hours. Okay, well, I want that money back. Well, when I go over in hours, are you going to pay me that? No, we have a fixed cost contract. So whether it takes me 5, which is great and I'm done early, or it takes me 11, which is awful, if it's my fault that we took 11, then I can't charge you for that. That's our agreement. If it's going to take 11 and there's another reason that's in our contract that says, hey, these are unforeseen conditions, which most of the time on my part, I would say doesn't happen. Right. With basements, after the year 2000, like it's unfinished. There aren't a lot of unforeseens. So when somebody asks me to quote labor and materials, that means you're high maintenance to me right away. And I'm going to find a way to politely decline your project in some way, shape, or form. I want we call this one, and this is probably the most common one and the one that contractors talk about the most, is when you get a call from someone and they say, "Hey, look, I'm looking to do my basement, in the not too distant future, we're looking to do a bathroom too and a kitchen. So, but we just want to get the basement quote for now." You are dangling the carrot in the hopes that the promise of future work is going to make me give you a lower price. What I have learned over the years is 95% of my clients, we do a basement, we don't see them again for 5, 7, 10 years. You know why? Because you just spent 60 to 80 grand on a basement. You likely do not have another 20 to 25 grand liquid to do your bathroom and then the other bathroom. And then you're going to do a kitchen, which, 5 years ago, a kitchen renovation, which is now basically a main floor renovation, was like 150 grand. Now you're looking at 200 because you're blowing out walls, you're doing all new floors, you're putting in an island. All these things are happening. You just basically told me about $200,000 worth of work. and you're asking me for a rebate. Now, I don't know you. And the reality is in business, I if I don't know you, I'm not giving you a rebate on the first job we do together. That one's going to be full ticket because I'm going to protect myself. I got employees, rent, trucks, all this stuff to pay for. I'm not giving you a discount in the hopes that I'm going to get you to pay full price. If I give you a discount once, you're going to expect a discount later. And the truth is, you don't have the volume of work, in my experience, for me to say, oh, here's a price cut. You know what I'm saying? My overhead, like my profit margin is single digits percentage. There isn't a lot for me to shave off after salaries are paid and overhead. If you have 5 or 6 employees, it's a big machine to run. So the promise of future work is to me the biggest kind of indicator that you don't know what things cost. Okay. Because you're dangling $300,000 worth of work in front of me and you're asking for a quote. So you're better off in those instances saying, I have a basement to do. I don't have any idea of cost or budget. Can you please educate me on what something could potentially cost? Can you give me a do not say the word ballpark because ballparks are big. If you've ever been to a baseball field, a ballpark is huge. You want a range, a budgetary guideline, something it's called price bracketing. So you want it's going to be, your average basement of around 650 square feet or 700 square feet is between X and X if you have these things. That's what you want to get into. So that's one. When it gets contentious and so, I supply somebody a price and they say, well, I know somebody who can do it for less. And on the inside, my dialogue is way different. On the inside or on the outside, I'm saying, oh, I understand. I can appreciate that you're shopping prices. On the inside, I'm like, if you have somebody who could do it for less, why are we still talking? Why haven't you hired them? My price is not changing. I know my numbers. It's not, I'm not pulling out a napkin and throwing this together and going, here you go. I'm not texting you to quote. It's in a software, it's broken down. If this price is not within your price point or your budget or your reality, cool. Just be honest with me and I'll be honest with you. So, uh, you know, you get what you pay for, but if you don't have an idea of what things cost and you want to do it for less and you're looking for top of the line, these guys have 5-star reviews. Everybody loves them. They're not going to be cheap. And they probably aren't going to be available either, right? They're going to be booking 6 months out. Pre-pandemic, we were booking typically 6 months out. Now, I would say I know Andre, M2, like we'll say I know 5 contractors, okay? They're all almost all booking for 2024. So that's a full, like we're talking 10 months away. So if you're going to come to them and say, "Hey, I know somebody who can do it for less." They're like, "Hey man, we're booked for a year. Like, great. Go get them." You know what I'm saying? The final one that kind of gives me pause when I'm talking to someone is when they ask, "Do we really need to get a permit for this? Like, is that really important?" If you're asking me that in our first conversation, I will educate you as to why you should get one. And then it's up to you. When the simpler contracts way back when I started out, what I would put in the contract was a client to provide permit, right? Which meant I am contractually protected that if the city comes to me, I can go, hey, the client said they were going to get the permit. They didn't. This is in their scope. It's not on me, right? Once that my company, and that was early on. We're talking way early. Like this is 10 years ago. Then once the project started getting bigger, we started doing main floor blowouts, anything to do with structural work. The minute that's happened, I'm talking to an engineer. I am talking to plans. I'm doing it all by the book because the liability is just way too high. So if we're blowing out structure and doing a bunch of things, and you're asking me why we need to get a permit, maybe our priorities do not align in how we want to do things. For me, my reputation with the city was important. I always had a good rapport with the inspectors. The last thing I needed was for one of these jobs to get a neighbor who's upset that they're doing renovations and the city gets called, and then now I'm there dealing with getting a permit when we should have got it before. So I want less headache. So the less headache is me going to get the permit and doing it that way than having it come back to haunt me later. So those are seven kind of red flags or warning signs when I'm talking to a client that would have me pause and ask them more questions along the way. So if you're thinking of it, I'm going to do a full video on that, I think, and organize those thoughts more because I want people when they talk to contractors to be able to get the answers that they want. As always, if you have any questions, please just throw them in the chat and I will answer them. I will break and just answer those right away. You'll just have to listen to me reading them on the screen. I posted something about basement apartments this week and if people wanted to know about them. Now, most people don't, but it is a subset of people that is interested in the potential for income in their house, especially with mortgage rates skyrocketing, the cost of homes skyrocketing. Anything you can do to help pay for your house that you may or may not have overpaid for is a big help. I live in a university town, right? There's always a demand for apartments, basement apartments. The house I'm in now is close to the university. I will be putting an apartment in mine. There is an unregistered one currently that my in-laws had. I am working to have it registered. So I did a bunch of content with my old company, Speed River Contracting, in the form of podcasts about how to go through the process of getting a basement apartment in Ontario and all that stuff, legalizing, etc. I would get a handful of calls a year on this. We'll say 10 calls a year. And right away, I would talk to people. I'd say, how much are you prepared to spend? Because they want to, it's an investment and you want to put in a little bit of money and get a lot back. Well, the return on investment and the investment itself are really important to align when you're doing this and be aware of. Okay. So back in the day, we'll say 5 years ago, basement apartment would have been $70,000, right? And here in Guelph, you could charge about $1,200. So the rough math is in 5 years, if you rent it for 5 years, it's paid for itself. And then everything on top of that is gravy, right? Nowadays, that cost is much higher. Materials and all of that, you're looking at probably closer to 100 grand, depending on what it is. Do you have a side entrance already? There's a lot of parameters. Your municipal government will probably, your municipal building department will probably have the information for all the requirements, egress window, fire code's a big deal, and all those things. But for you, there are some questions you want to ask yourself before you get going. And it's like, how much money are you prepared to spend? Is there a sticker shock that's going to cause you to pull the plug on this where you're like, no, I don't want to do this. If you here, I used to get people going, if I spend $30,000 to do it, that'd be fine. And I would say, all right, well, right there, I knew that they hadn't got the right information about how much things cost. I'd say, do you have a second interest? No, we're going to dig one out at the side of the house. And they'd say, okay, that digging up, cutting a hole in your foundation and putting in a door, just doing that will cost you $30,000. Never mind the rest of it on the inside. So if you're not prepared to go through that, you probably want to look elsewhere or could do some more homework, and I'm happy to share with you. So I created a bunch of content with the old company so that if they called and they said, hey, I want to get a basement apartment, I would say, hey, great. Have you looked at the information we have on our podcast? No, I'll send you a link. So I would send them the link, and then more than likely I would never hear from them again. I've probably in my lifetime, I've done less than 10, and a few of them are for people I already knew. They were friends of mine who were going to do it and they needed someone to do it, and everything lined up perfectly. Now, you want to ask yourself a couple of things going forward into this. Are you not just about the money and not just about the cost of the renovation? Are you prepared to be a landlord? And what that means is vetting tenants, collecting checks. What if they don't pay? What are you at risk for? Like in Ontario, here in Canada, if you are trying to get a tenant out that isn't paying, good luck. They could be there for a year not paying you. Rent here currently for a basement apartment is anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 for a one bedroom basement apartment. It's bananas. But your cost to put it in might be 100 grand, if you have nothing there, no side interest, no nothing. So you want to have the parameters of how much is this going to cost? How much am I going to make? Those two have to be aligned before you do anything. What are the hoops I have to jump through with the city? Providing documentation. Fire code is a big deal because now you're creating two units and you don't want a fire in one of those units to spread to the other unit because you have two people. Shared laundry, all these things. Are you going to put in another laundry downstairs? What about egress, exit, all of those things? But really, what are you going to do if the tenant doesn't pay? What are the rules around that? Educate yourself on that. And a lot of the people I know who have been successful with these have relied on their experience in vetting tenants, in getting people in and understanding going forward that who will or won't be a good tenant and they have a form. Real estate agents deal a lot with rentals and they have really good documents because I know a lot of real estate agents who tend to own rental properties. So I learned a lot there. Excuse me. Um, so that was one thing. Let me look at my notes here. Building code payback time, cost to do it versus the payback time. Are you prepared to deal with tenants? My wife and I somehow fell into being lucky enough to own a rental property for a little bit. The market went up, we refinanced, and the person was unable to pay their rent due to circumstances they could not control. I don't want to get into their personal life. And we were too stressed out. So we just sold it. We sold the house. We couldn't handle it because there were periods where we were paying two mortgages and we can't pay two mortgages. The bank was saying here, we were able to for, a short period, but you're dipping into savings because you're not, when you have a rental property, more often than not, you are not cash rich. You are, you are building equity. And in 20 years, it's a win. But in the short term, it is nerve wracking, scary, and we were not built for that. So we sold it, and I would never, will never be in a position probably to do that again. So that was a learning experience. All right, we got some tidying up here to do. I have put out some spreadsheets in the past that people have downloaded, but I haven't really gotten any feedback on them. And I know they say no news is good news, but I would like to ask people if they could give me feedback on it. All those people who have downloaded them or I've sent them to, if it sucks, I'd like to know and I'd like to work at it and see if I can improve them. I want to build more of those if they do help people as I go along. So I would appreciate anybody who has used the framing calculator or the selection sheet. I was a recent one, the phases, the subtask phases. If those are helpful, please let me know, or if there's a way I can make them better or how you use them. That would be awesome. I'm going to try and turn out a couple of pieces of content this week. The 5 tools that I can't really live without. I think it's 6. And these aren't like your impact driver and stuff like that. These are the little ones that you don't think about where you're just like, oh, that made my life better. And these are ones over the years that I still own, I still use that I don't think I could live without. So I'm going to try to turn that one out. And then I will do a piece of content on the warning signs of that you're a bad client or a contractor may see you as a bad client and have some red flags for you. I am looking into trying to figure out an affiliate program, whether it's Home Depot, Amazon, or Lowe's. Home Depot, I applied to and got declined like a year ago, but they were looking at the numbers from my website, which is awful, not the YouTube channel. So I got to figure out how I can get that to go. All right. Any advice on having an Alex panel that's an inch from the edge of a stem wall in the basement? Worried about perimeter insulated wall. Uh, Edge of a stem wall. What's a stem wall, Randy? Um, I do not worry about. You worry about what's in front of your panel, and so it's your panel's fine. It depends on how old the house is, what kind of breakers you have in there. It does it look clean? Uh, the breakers itself should be able to trip if there's a problem. So I'm going to guess you're worried about fire. If you haven't had any problems or had any, if you are worried, okay, if you are worried, call an electrician, have them come by, say, what do I need to do? So off topic. Have you covered backers for tub surrounds? I'm redoing my basement. Yes. Okay. Here's another thing I was thinking about. I Bathrooms are another thing I've done a ton of. So I was thinking of doing once I get this further along, a space like a bathroom specific one for people because bathrooms are like a small room that's a lot of work. So backer board, waterproofing systems. I've used a lot of the Schluter system because of all the mortar in it. It is not always the most user friendly, and if you're using the Curdy board, it's kind of wonky. Uh, Concrete. Sorry, let me finish this point, Randy, and I'll get back to yours. The one we started using is called Weedy, WEDI. It is a cement coated foam board. It is the best one I've used. Here in Canada, it is expensive, but I know in other places it is not as expensive. It is way easier to use. You do not have to put a band in the corners and everything. It's a waterproof caulking membrane. My tile guy, Brian, who's like 65 years old and super anal, loves it. He says it's the best thing to put tile on. The trick with Weedy is, and if you're going to do a little bit of homework on it, YouTube's got great resources. Um, it has a better, easier, user friendly system, but your framing has to be pretty dead on. Okay, it doesn't have a lot of forgiveness, right? If you miss and you cut something too big, you have to put another piece on. You can't just put the Curdy membrane over like with the Schluter and the problem goes away. If you're going to use the old school method of like dense shield or cement board and Mape, the roll on waterproofing, that one's okay. The old school methods still work. It's if you use the system properly, it'll work. Okay. You're looking at finite degrees of better. So it's important to know what you're comfortable with. I'm not a fan of cement board. It's tough to work with. You got to haul it around. You got to cut it with a grinder or cut it with a tooth saw. It's just a pain in the butt. And then once you put it on, you can get like kind of waves because the cement board is heavy and dips. So cement board is not the best one in my mind to work with. As a waterproofing system, it'll work fine. My preference for showers tends to be acrylic base, shower tray, a weedy waterproofing system, and white tile. It's timeless, doesn't go wrong. In 20 years, it'll still look good. It'll still be in style ish. Whereas if you get trendy and use a bunch of stuff, it's tough to work with. Yeah, Wheaties. Watch some videos. Wheatie is the easiest one, the most DIY friendly, and if it's readily available, all for it. Give her. So, Randy, you have concrete foundation walls too close to the corner, might need to be move it inwards so it's accessible after adding 2x4 walls around the basement. Okay. If you can avoid moving your electrical panel is expensive to move. Great. I would have an electrician come in, have a chat with him, talk to him about what you want to do. Cause from here, I can't see what it is. If you want to send me some pictures, totally down. Um, but if it's too close to the corner, what you want really is accessibility to the wires. If you're going to change anything and the wall gets super tight, that's when the electrician's going to be working with it. It's going to cost you more money. You don't want to get into that scenario. You want it to be user friendly. So my recommendation would be to if you're going to finish your basement, you're going to be hiring an electrician at some point would be just say, hey, can you come by for a consult? Would be what I would do. Digging out a basement bathroom into concrete, long day. Am I okay to cut into the footer a few inches so I can get my wet vent up into the stud wall? Uh, how much? Are you just like notching it so you can get the pipe, or are you cutting out a chunk? Like, how big's your house? How big's the footing? I don't want to tell you to do something that's against code, but if you're just taking little chunks out of it, you're not compromising anything. Like, you're taking a little dividend to get the pipe in. It's not the end of the world. Um, but you might be able to, um, and I have to see it, but you could be able to redirect it another way, right? If you're using a tub, I gotta remember how to do this. Yeah, if you're chipping a little bit of it, it's not a big deal. If you're taking out big chunks of it, yeah. If it's the drain, is it the drain for the shower or the drain your wet vent? So that's a 3-inch vent. Yeah, send me some pictures. Happy to look at it. If you're just doing the 2-inch vent, right, or the 1 5/8, and you just need a little bit of space, nobody's going to chew that out. Wet vent too. Okay. I would send it to me. And then worst case scenario would be to talk to a plumber in your area. Just, pick their brain. But yeah, please send it and I'll have a look. Does anybody else have any questions? If you don't, I'm going to wait a few seconds. That's everything for me. Cheers. Thank you, Dave and Karen. That's it for me for today. I'm going to do one more of these and then we'll figure out if you guys like these or not. And then maybe we'll keep doing them. Maybe not every week. Might be tired when I start the new job, but I've enjoyed doing these, and that means I can do something that doesn't have as serious a requirement as putting out a video. So as always, I'm going to say thanks for stopping by and good luck on your project. Thank you.